Good evening. I'm hereby calling to order the April 10th, 2023 meeting of the Committee of the Whole. May I have a roll call, please?
Present.
Mr. DeJohn.
Here.
Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mr. Monaco. Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder.
Here.
Mrs. Teresi.
Here.
Please join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excuse me. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss sponsorship opportunities for the Aquatic and Community Center. I will turn the meeting over to Ashley Yesel. Thank you. You'll just want to hit the button till it's green. Perfect, thank you.
Hi, good evening, Mayor DeCicco. Am I pronouncing that correctly? No, DeCicco.
If we were in Italy, you'd be right.
DeCicco, thank you. Council members and staff, my name is Ashley Yesel, and my consulting business focuses on compliance, project management, and fundraising for nonprofits and local government. I am here to introduce myself, discuss my proposal to fundraise for the Aquatic and Community Center Phase 1. I have, regarding my background, I have a Master's of Public Administration from UNC Chapel Hill. I graduated in August 2022. They are the second in the country for local government, and my class is really focused on local government operations and financing. Before this degree, my education was in finance mathematics. I'm able to relay how a donation would coincide with the city's financing strategy and bonds and the municipal income tax increase. I can also help support budget conversations if needed with support from Karen. Before and while getting my MPA, my career has been in sales, consulting, and nonprofit leadership. Earlier in my career, I worked for two consulting companies, one that serves Fortune 500 businesses and another that serves local Cleveland clients. I was very client-facing and traveled nationwide to serve clients' needs, maintain client relationships, and pitch projects to current and new clients. I was an executive director of a small nonprofit on the West Side that served women, children, and their families. I was the organization's main fundraiser and increased revenue by 40% the 3 years that I was there. This was mostly through grants, private donations, and fundraising campaigns. Within these roles, I became proficient in relationship building, sales, and project management. The last 5 years, I've worked in social services. This will help me explain the impact of movement and mental and physical health, creativity, and play in a child's development, and how the Aquatic and Recreation Center can help build community bonds that provides a safe environment for your families. Also, when I was at the Women's Recovery Center as the executive director, I resumed child care programming. We focus on helping a child's development through movement, creativity, play, and social interactions, which aligns very much with what you're trying to achieve with the Aquatic Center. So my general project scope that I have and I'm proposing to council and leadership. Project management, so this would include tracking of donations and any donor contact. I anticipate to kind of be the ground and obviously work alongside with the city staff for their needs, mostly be doing the bulk of the work by myself. I would help with donor solicitation material drafting, including emails from Mayor DeCicco, other emails from the city, memos, social media, letters, strategy briefs, and more. I would help set up and conduct face-to-face and virtual meetings with donor contacts and organizations. And I would also help to communicate with donor contacts and appropriate vendors, including naming rights and other donor recognition requests. My hourly rate is $125. I anticipate up to 50 hours per month on this project. I plan to bill a little over $6,000 per month based on these estimates. I charge a flat rate based on hours worked versus a percentage of my sales. I believe this is a more ethical and fair cost structure for the city and your citizens. With my current book of business, I have no current conflicts of interest. The proposal starts May 1st, and I anticipate to work with you through December 31st. Happy to extend that if it's needed. And also, if council and staff is not satisfied with my work, happy, we can talk about it, and it can be terminated at any time. So this is not a automatic 7-month contract. It can be on a month-to-month basis. I plan to use the relationships the city already has, including donor and vendor lists. Once I receive the contact list, I will review and identify any missing businesses to target based off of location, profit, and philanthropic giving history. To prepare for May 1st, which is the intended start of the proposal, I'll be researching other cities around the state that have similar projects. Currently, I've found only a few city recreation centers with fundraising goals of 5 to 10 million. These include Strongsville and Upper Arlington and Columbus. I know that the Metro Park Zoo uses its nonprofit arm, the Cleveland Zoological Society, to fundraise large gifts for them. Naming rights is a large part of their fundraising efforts. Right now, they are working on the Primate Initiative, which, if you've heard, that's a $90 million initiative. So I have a few contacts there and plan to reach out if my proposal is accepted. Also, naming rights and donations are also common among Cleveland universities, hospitals, and professional sports teams, so I'll look at them for best practices as we continue. On a personal level, just kind of closing here, I am part Italian and have studied the Italian language and culture extensively, so I love that Mayfield Heights has deep Italian roots. I also swam competitively when I was young and still swam regularly as an everyday exercise. I love being outdoors. If you couldn't tell, I'm a little sunburned today. Hence, I feel connected to your community and this project on several levels. I strongly believe in the new aquatic and community center to enhance your community and the surrounding communities and benefit your citizens. I would be honored to serve Mayfield Heights in this capacity, and I hope you strongly consider my proposal. Any questions from the council?
Does council have any questions this evening? Mr. Mano?
Sure. In your scope section here, it says maximum donations from your donor contacts while taking up the least amount of your time possible.
Yep.
What are you going to generate as far as donors? Are you going out and find donors, or are you asking the city to provide you with a list of donors?
Yeah, so the city has said they have a list of 30 to 50 contacts that we'll start with. These are vendors of the project, prior city vendors, also people that have donated to the city in the past. We will start from that list, and then I'll build on that list based off of anyone that's not identified, looking at other target businesses in Mayfield Heights, looking at nonprofits in Mayfield Heights and any other businesses or foundations that have donated to them. So I will start from what you have, since you have existing relationships, and then build from there as needed. Thank you for the question.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes, so thank you, Madam President. Why did you decide to do it by guarantee payments rather than percentage of what you bring in?
Yeah, so I believe percentage is appropriate in the for-profit industry. I think you think about sales and profit and taking a percentage of that as a cut. When you're talking about nonprofits, you're taking away more money from the people that they serve. When you're talking about government, you're taking away more money if you're taking that percentage from your citizens. So I think it's more fair and equitable to pay me by the hour. I think my hourly rate is reasonable, and I would not want to take any more dollars from the aquatic and recreation center that's necessary.
And what's our guarantee?
There's no guarantee. I'd hope to project. Once we kind of dig into the current donor list, we can try to project and plan on what that is. But it just depends. We'll find out when we get into it more. But that's why I have it as a month-to-month contract, where if you guys are not happy with my services, we can discontinue them.
Ashley, I have a question for you. Were you going to be the one going out and speaking to the people?
Yes. Yes.
I didn't know if this was something you would be doing with the mayor or just yourself.
I plan to make all those contacts myself, and as the mayor feels it's appropriate, can come along with me. But I'll be doing the bulk of the work, and once I have kind of all the companies, businesses, groups listed, I will talk with the staff and team to see who might best be a fit to come with me if they have an existing relationship or have leverage.
Okay. And Mr. Balestra, I'll ask the
Thank
next
you.
question.
Ashley, you've said you've done this work before with naming rights type of situations. Are you at liberty to give any examples of what you've raised and how much you've raised for different organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that I don't have an extensive experience with naming rights. I know when I was at the Women's Recovery Center, we named several rooms based off of gifts that were given. I, plan to follow a lot of the cities that I've mentioned, the Zoological Society. Ronald McDonald House does a really great job with naming rights there. I have contacts at both agencies. So, with the Women's Recovery Center, we were proficient at doing our capital campaign. It's much smaller than 35 million. But, I was successful in meeting our goals at that point for the smaller capital campaign. And I think from a, sales perspective, which is the same, I can't speak numbers, but, my expectations were met at the consulting agency as one of the lead sales in our department. So,
Okay, thank you.
yep, thank you for the question.
Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ashley, I looked up, your Ashley Ryan Consulting, and you do mostly social service work. I didn't see anything. I saw that you do women's recovery. So that's your company, am I correct?
So the company is Ashley Ryan's Consulting, and Women's Recovery Center was my prior organization that I was with.
So prior, so
Yes.
that's listed under your Ashley Ryan Consulting, but you're not with that organization?
No, I did do some work after with them to kind of help transition. They went through a merger, so I did do some work with them afterward to help with that transition. But no, that was my experience as executive director is separate from that.
That was separate, because then there was a gentleman who did drug addiction, and he was under your Ashley Ryan. Is he one of your employees?
Do you know the name?
Oh, gosh. Chris, began with,
Chris.
maybe I'm wrong, but there was the women's recovery, and then there was a gentleman, and he did more with drug addiction or some sort of social services.
Oh, Matt Talbot. That's what.
It was Matt,
That's
okay,
Matt
I'm
Talbot.
sorry. I
Yeah.
guess it wasn't Chris. But I didn't see anything and you went into business and opened Ashley Ryan in 2022. When did you do the fundraising? And
Yep. So that would be when I was at the Women's Recovery Center prior to that. So I was there I was a board member from 2017 to 2019, helped out with fundraising in that capacity. And then when I took over as executive director in 2019 to 2022. So that's the 3 years there. And then Matt Talbot, I'm currently helping, I do counseling once a week, kind of the social service sector for Matt Talbot, which is a substance use disorder facility for men over in Parma.
And you said you're going to work 50 hours a month?
Yep.
Which is like 2.5 hours a day?
Yep.
Do you think you'll be successful just utilizing 2.5 hours a day to raise 20 million or 10 million or whatever they want to raise? 5 million? 2 million. You only want to raise 2 million?
That was what was suggested.
Oh, I thought it was more than that for all the naming rights. But, 2.5 hours a day will be enough time?
I think so. And if it's not, we can evaluate that in a month and always revise the proposal. Based off of the context that you have and reaching out, I think that will be more than doable by the end of the year. And if we finish early, we can talk about how much more we'd want to raise. But absolutely, I think it would be enough.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, so how did you know that we were looking for somebody, or were you referred to us by somebody?
Yes, I was referred to by someone that spoke at the council a few meetings ago, if you remember.
Okay.
He he had accepted another job and was not able to fulfill his duties with this, so he stopped pursuing it and suggested me as the contact going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
I just wanted to confirm, you said it was a month to month, so the 50,000 is a total till the end of the year?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, and it's a 5-day business notice, if we were to cancel either
Yeah.
way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam President,
Mrs. Sabetta?
thank you. If you could just go over again how you figured on the 50,000, just one more time.
Yep, so 125 times 50 times 7. Hopefully that math is right.
It works.
All right, great.
So the plans are to be open by July, maybe August. I guess it's a question for both. If we don't have anybody at that time, are we still going to, how are we going to open the center without a name? Like, are we going to put it out there that we're looking for donations, I guess?
Well, the plan is to name, we need a name for it without a donor name. So whatever, if it's Mayfield Heights Community and Aquatic Center or whatever, I think we need to come up with something that's not as much of a mouthful, or maybe an acronym to kind of shorten it a little bit. But the plan is to one way or another have a name like that in place, whether we have a donor's name to add to that now or in the future.
Okay. And then you would add whatever. if
We
she
would
were to-
add a donor's name to that, yeah.
Okay.
And, and that's not, that's in the, that's just for the building. There's lots of other opportunities that we've identified, smaller rooms, the slides, things here and there. So there's an opportunity to, to name those also, so that wouldn't have such a, getting donor names will not hinder us opening the building.
Okay. So when you go out for a donor, are you going to sell each center? Like, are you going to shoot for one big goal first, or are you going to try and see what that person would take out of all
Yeah.
these different areas?
We're gonna go for the gold first and try to get someone to buy the $1 million naming rights, just so that can be done first. So that'll be my target. I'll target in priority of what we think their capacity is for donations, and then keep working down the list.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mano?
My personal opinion is that Mayfield Heights is paying for this center. There's been a lot of time and effort involved in putting this together. And I believe we should all be proud of our community, and that it should be the Mayfield Heights Aquatic and Event Center, period. That's my personal opinion. And then there's some other names that need to be recognized as far as the community building or the community room and the meeting rooms and some of the pools and so on. But I think to blow our own horn, it should be the Mayfield Heights Aquatic and Event Center is what should be on that building. I don't think anyone else's name should be on there for the main title of the building. And that's just my opinion.
Mayor?
Thank you. I know, we've made such a point to try and keep these costs under control as much as humanly possible. I think to pass up an opportunity to at least try to recoup some of the money through naming rights. Possibly we've identified maybe $1 million or $2 million total for everything. I don't see how we don't go out and try to do that. And I think we would know very early on what our chances are. Now, you know, maybe I'm wrong. You know, maybe we don't. But I think at least trying, I think we owe it to our residents to try and recoup some of that money. So that's just my thoughts. That's why we went for the whole naming rights and trying to find somebody to do it for us. That was the main gist of what we're trying to do. And I understand what Mr. Mano says, and we definitely want to keep it Mayfield Heights Aquatic and Event Center or whatever. But yeah, no, it's going to say Mayfield Heights, that's for sure. It needs to do that.
Mrs. Sabetta?
So when you're going out to do this, just for naming rights, is sponsorship involved in this? If someone wanted to sponsor, is that going to be mentioned and put forth?
Can you elaborate a little bit further on the your definition of sponsorship?
If they wanted to sponsor a swimming pool or the gymnasium or the playground or the community center, a list or a project. Yeah, naming rights. And if someone just wanted to be a sponsor, would that be in the discussion?
You mean like donate a small portion of money to that
Right, if
area?
they wanted something inside there with their name on it for
Like a park bench or something? Yeah.
$250,000 type of sponsorship other than a naming right of that room. They wanted to be part of the gymnasium, but
Not be the big deal.
without having the big, that type of sponsorship, a business. And, you know, are we talking about the front of the building, and then is there another for the back of the building that faces 271? Is that
Mayor.
one?
So the opportunities that we identified were the main sponsor for the whole project, for the building that would face 271. It would be on the gymnasium. Then there's community room, as Mr. Mano said, community room opportunities. There's lots of small opportunities too, like you said, benches, slides.
ADA playground.
The playground. There's lots of opportunities. There you go. Karen's pulling it up right now. But there was, 13 or so. So it was the gym, inside the gym, you could you sponsor or name that, whatever you choose to call that. The community center, multi-purpose room, senior fitness center, outdoor concourse patio, the slide complex, pool concessions, a picnic pavilion, the playground, the pools. So the kitchen, I mean, there's lots of opportunity.
Okay, that's going to be mentioned along with the naming rights then.
Well, those are all really technically naming rights.
Okay.
Sponsors, or you sponsor the room, or you sponsor the slide, or you naming rights. I think it's just semantics there, however you want to use the word.
Okay.
Mayor, I'm sorry, Council, can I ask?
Mrs. Dressy?
So is a sponsorship the same as the naming rights? So it's all the same, and a sponsorship will last, indefinitely as well as the naming rights?
Yes, that's my
Well,
understanding.
Yeah, we need to, I think, we need to discuss timeline, time, how long. Typically, if you look at some buildings, even in some of the bigger naming rights, we'll look at the stadium, for example. It's not forever. But we could make it forever. It's it's whatever we want to do. It's when we finally come down to a contract with this person, it's going to be up to us to determine the length of that sponsorship or naming right.
Yeah, I was trying to, get clarification on
Yeah.
a sponsorship versus naming rights for
It's the
aquatic
same.
center,
It's
but
the
it's all
same
the
thing.
same.
Yeah.
Mrs. Tressi.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. Have we considered at all a fee schedule similar to like a real estate person who really is out there hustling to, sell a building, buy a building, things of that nature, more of a commission,
So
a commission kind of contract instead of a
ones-
monthly
yeah.
contract that, 2.5 hours a day doesn't seem like a tremendous amount of time. Whereas if you're like a real estate person or a salesperson who earns a commission, you really work, you spend a lot more than 2 hours a day.
the ones we looked at, other companies that approached us, especially after hearing about what we wanted to do. Sean was approached by a few. I got emails from a few. They were looking at 25%, most of them, 25 to 30%. So you're looking at, $400,000 maybe that we would be giving up. So we wouldn't be raising $2 million. We'd be raising $1.6 million. That, to me, that didn't seem, I didn't think we wanted to do that, spend that kind of money. Especially when we had an opportunity to go with somebody who was experienced and wanted to go out and do this for much less money, $50,000 if we paid for the whole contract. And as a month-to-month agreement, we could determine, hey, is this worth it? Is this where we're going, or is this not, the path we want to go down? I think that's the most appealing thing of this agreement, is it's month to month. And Ashley is able to give us updates. How's it going? Update council, keep us appraised of how things are going, and we can make the determination if we continue.
Thank you.
Madam President.
Mr. Monaco, do you have any questions? I know you came late.
First of all, I'd like to apologize for being late. I was stranded on the freeway. I was taking my grandson to Hudson, and there was an accident, so I apologize for that. No, I really don't have any questions. The only comment that I want to make is that by reading the agreement here, it says that they're using the list of donors that we have rather than them getting their own list. So that kind of worries me a little bit. And also the amount of time, we're limited to so many hours. If we need additional hours, is it going to cost extra, or how is it going to work in that case?
Ashley, can
Yep.
you?
So in that case, I would do the first month, May to May 31st. If there are additional hours during that month that we determine, I will ask to revise the contract and say, hi, council and staff, I think to meet our numbers, we need to continue to increase this to 70 hours or 80 hours. And let's talk about what resources. I mentioned before that I was an executive director, a nonprofit executive director, and I raised $1 million as a very small portion of my 9 to 5, but it was more like a 9 to 9 job. And I did the grant writing and did fundraising, but it was a very small portion of that, and I would say it was much less than 2.5 hours a day, and was able to raise $1 million in a year. So I think it's doable. I think especially with your contacts and how appealing the project is, I'm not concerned, but we can always approach that and talk about it again and see how the first month goes. Thank you for the question.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Ms. Mayor?
And correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley, earlier you said you use our contacts to start with, but you do have your own contacts.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Mano?
You know, this project's been going on for quite some time. Everybody in this city knows what's happening out there. They've seen the progress. Has any of the movers and shakers of this city approached the mayor or anyone else with an interest in having naming rights or donating to the facility? I mean, this has been going on for almost a year, and has anybody come forward and said, you know, I'd be interested in having my name on that building, or I'd be interested in making a donation? I mean, has anybody come forward?
Madam Chair.
Because if
I-
they
I
have, then we don't need a person out there trying to sell it.
There has been a couple conversations I've had with potential donors for some of the very small stuff. They've seen our potential list. I have not reached out to some of our A-list potentials because I want some guidance first and how that conversation goes, how it flows. I think I need some expertise to really start that conversation. I'm not, as important as this is, I don't think I'm qualified, at least without a little help, to have some of the conversations with some of the bigger companies and some of the bigger contacts that we had. Some of them aren't even a couple names that personally I think I brought to the table aren't companies here in Mayfield Heights. They're nonprofits. They're a couple of foundations. So I've never had any experience approaching that type of organization before. So, yeah, to answer your question, a little bit of small interest, yes, for the smaller projects.
And just to add, if I can, I think a large part of what I'm doing too is helping to keep everything organized and making sure we follow through with the donor contacts, follow through with the name recognition and anything that they ask of us. I think there could be 30 donors, and just keeping track of that and making sure that we keep our promises as donors, it's going to be a bigger job. And I know the mayor and staff are very, very busy, so having that support would be helpful for them too.
And Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. So I don't know if the mayor can answer this or if you can, but we just hired an economic developer in our last council meeting. So how do you differ from the economic developer? I would think they're the same, but how do you differ?
Mayor.
Well, the Silverlode, the company that we just agreed to work with, is focusing just on one project and one company. That's it.
They can't do both?
They're not fundraisers. No, they're not fundraisers.
Thank you.
I wouldn't say, I guess to answer your question, they can't do both because they're not experts at fundraising. They don't do fundraising.
Mr. Monaco.
You know, even though I didn't like the location because I thought that the old complex should have been placed somewhere else, I think now it's really ideal for, you know, placing a sign and getting sponsors. But if I were to sponsor anything at that location, I would probably want my sign to be in the back of the building, probably facing the freeway. And that really shouldn't be very hard to sell. I mean, I would imagine that you would have all kinds of people that are willing to do that and get their name and exposure to the traffic on the freeway.
We're asking $1 million for it. So, I mean, I hope it's that easy from your lips to God's ears, but
Another choice that we have, we can do like a monument sign with one of those LED signs that you can advertise different companies, different events, and possibly charge for it.
Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When Mr. Sowers was here, he was the gentleman who had some conflict. What he suggested he was going to do was do a script for the mayor. And then the mayor was, if I'm not mistaken, and then the mayor was going to go out and present with the script that Mr. Sowers wrote. Are you going to do the same thing?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. I mean, I plan, like I said before, I plan to do all of the meetings, and then when the mayor thinks it's appropriate for him to go alone or with me, we'll work that out. But absolutely, a part of the contract is donor solicitation materials, so the script will be a part of that.
And we also have a brochure that we did that is already intact. Will you be using that same,
Absolutely.
since we've already paid for that?
Yep. I'll be using that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any further questions from?
Real quick, I'm sorry. And Ryan was going to take much more of a back seat than Ashley because of some potential conflicts. So that's the difference in this agreement also, is that Ashley's going to be much more involved than Ryan would have, face-to-face.
I just kind of worry about the 2.5 hours, the amount of time, the way you divide it out. And it's clearly divided out in the contract. It seems very difficult in 2.5 hours to bring in that much or that many sponsors or donors. But that's just my opinion.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask Ashley, how did you come up with
exactly.
2.5 hours?
Yeah,
of your
so
time?
50 hours per month is kind of where our focus was. So, ends up about 2 days a week or 2.5 hours per day. And, we had thought about, okay, if I spend, you have 30 to 50 contacts, and I spend 5 to 10 hours on each contact. So that's, some simple math here. I wish I had my calculator. 30 of the contacts times 10. So there's 300 hours there. So that would be, 6 months.
6 months.
And hopefully, that's 10 hours. So that's the max that we're estimating. So hopefully, each donor would take about 5 hours to 10, and then, making it for the rest of the 50. But that's kind of where we projected it there. And again, happy to revise that if we think there is more or less needed.
Ashley, you'd stated that it was 7 days, so really it's 5 days. So that would be like an extra hour a day then, if you're going to work Saturday and Sundays. So, I'm just saying, we're
Oh, if you're working
probably,
Saturday
if
and
you're
Sunday,
not working
yep.
Saturdays, they have to have more time during the week.
Yeah.
You'd be
yeah,
giving us more time, so it's not technically 2.5.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I
if
didn't
you-
do
if
the
you
math. I was just going
Work 8
by.
to 5.
Yeah.
I just took the numbers. If you work 8 to 5 and there's 20 days or 21 days in a month, that's basically what it works out to if you use your calculator.
Yeah.
But, if you're going to work Saturdays and Sundays
Yeah,
and
I do.
meet with corporations that are working on Saturday and Sunday, then possibly.
Yep.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could, I think you got to think about it too. It's not like, okay, I'm starting at 8 a.m. and I'm quitting at 10:30. I'm sure that's not how it works. So you're going to work 8 hours maybe one day, maybe none the next, and however many the
Okay.
next. I mean, I don't think
Consulting is.
just dividing, and then meetings might not be during the day; they might be in the evening. So I mean, I think you got to look at it as a flexible 50 hours a month.
Yep.
Okay. Any further questions from council? All right, thank you, Ashley.
Thank you all. Really
for
appreciate your time.
I appreciate. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mr. Mano. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
This meeting has now been adjourned. Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the April 10th council meeting of the City of Mayfield Heights. I hope everyone had a nice holiday. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Balestrea.
Present.
Mr. DeJohn.
Here.
Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mr. Monaco.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta. Here. Mrs. Snyder.
Here.
Mrs. Teresi.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll move to the approval of the minutes from our Committee of the Whole meeting on March 27th. I hope everyone has had time to read these minutes over. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Madam President, I have a change
Oh, wait, let's.
on the Committee of the Whole
We
meetings.
have to make a motion first, and then I'll ask for the
Okay,
changes.
all right.
Sorry. Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second
Second.
by Mr. Balestrea. Are there any changes, amendments, or deletions to those minutes? Mr. DeJohn?
Thank you. At the end of the session, I did mention that all of these items were brought to us tonight, were not in our package, and I said I am voting no on these. However, I suggested that council take a good look at these before voting on them. So if that can be added, I don't know my exact wording, but maybe Shanisha can find out and add them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Lloyd, could you look into that, please?
Certainly, not a problem.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Through Chair,
Opposed? Oh,
I abstain as I was near.
thank you, Mr. Monaco. These minutes have been approved and will be amended. Next is the approval of the minutes from our council meeting, March 27th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea,
Second?
second by Mrs. Sabetta. Are there any changes or amendments or deletions to those minutes?
Through Chair, again, I abstain because I wasn't here.
All in favor, thank you, Mr. Monaco. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Opposed? These minutes now have been approved. Does any member of council have any correspondence or announcements? Okay, Mr. DeJohn, his finger up.
I'll let Mrs. Sabetta go first.
Okay, Mrs. Sabato.
Thank you, Madam President. The Mayfield Union Cemetery will have its annual meeting on April 19th at 1:30 in the Mayfield Village Community Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mano?
I have a couple of things. First of all, is there a paper shortage in the city of Mayfield Heights? Are we running low on paper, or do we have sufficient amount of paper? Because I'll tell you what, I do not ever want to receive another agenda double-sided like this one is. This is ridiculous. Single face, the way it should be, so you can correlate, so you can follow things. I got resolutions on the back of an agenda. That's crazy. I don't want that to happen again. So whoever is responsible for that, pull your head out and don't do it again, please. The second thing I want to say is, once again, the chief provided us, the fire chief, with his annual report. Excellent piece of work. Good reading, does a great job with this every year, and I want to thank him for doing that. That's all I have.
Stole my report. Thank you, Chief. All
Mine
right.
too.
And Mr. DeJohn?
Thank you, Madam President. So I had a resident, or really two residents, contact me about the aquatic center and wondering if they were going to get flooded by this aquatic center, because I guess Mayfield Village, when they built their pool, it created flooding situations in the basement of residents near there. So they were asking me if there's a retention pond, and I don't know if anyone can remember if there is, but if they can we get maybe a photo of that? So I can send it to them.
If you wanted to share those names with us, we'd be more than happy to reach out
Okay.
to them.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to really thank Mr. Higley from the last meeting when I mentioned about parking at the end of Fruitland and Woodhurst. I noticed, that was Monday night, and I noticed on Tuesday and every day since then, every one of those contractor trucks has been backed in, so they can now see if they're pulling out, if someone is in front of them with a child in a stroller or someone walking their dog. So it's, I mean, it happened just the next day, and every day since then, the trucks are backed in, which is really helpful for people walking on the sidewalk behind those big trucks. So I wanted to just thank Gavin Smith for
Thank you.
taking it under consideration and doing it.
All right. Any other correspondence? I just had one thing. First, it was to commend the chief as well, but second, NOPEC has reached out and provided information to all council and will be having several informational meetings for residents. I'm hoping that we can post the times and dates on the city website if it's not there already. The closest meeting will be held at Richmond Heights City Hall on April 20th and Lyndhurst City Hall on April 27th at 7 p.m. Okay. Next, we will move to reports of officers, starting with the mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Last week, I had the privilege of swearing in 3 firefighter paramedics who have joined our city's fire department. We welcome them and wish them the best as they serve and protect our residents. To piggyback on what the council president was referring to, NOPEC will conduct a meeting on April 26th at 7 at the Lyndhurst Community Center. Yeah. So anyone who has any questions about NOPEC's services or their recent issues that they've had, they can go to that meeting. NOPEC staff will be on hand to answer the questions. You can enroll questions about the program and enrollment will be answered there. The Community Emergency Response Team, CERT for short, for Mayfield Heights, Mayfield Village, Highland Heights, and Richmond Heights, is looking for new members to join the team. The team reports to the fire chiefs in these communities and also supports the police departments. What you would be doing is assisting with first aid patrols at community events, distributing home disaster preparedness information, traffic control during events and emergencies, and managing warming, cooling centers, and much more, including helping the police and fire officers with active shooter drills and other training events. Team members will receive free training and a backpack loaded with emergency response supplies. So if anyone is interested, you could visit Tri Community CERT, that's T-R-I, community, at CERT.com for more information and to download the application. You could also email tricommunitycert@gmail.com with questions also. And as a reminder, our annual Shred Recycle Day is May 13th between 9 and 12, and we'll be at the City Pool parking lot on Chelmsford. There will be auxiliary officers there to direct traffic in and out of the parking lot. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the mayor? Mr. DeJohn?
Thank you, Madam President. Mayor, can you confirm or deny the rumor that Hobby Lobby's going in where Walmart is? Because I get a lot of people calling me and asking me, and then telling me that's Hobby Lobby's going in there. So,
They have approached the building department and started what they need to do, yeah. So
okay, so they are going in.
Yeah.
And they're only taking half the store? Is that correct?
Is it half, Braden? It's exactly half? Yeah, okay. I thought it
Thank
was a
you.
little less, but yeah, I guess it's half.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Law Director, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no formal report this evening, but I would like to reiterate to council that I sent a memo out on April 6th regarding ordinance numbers 2023-10 and 2023-11, which, as I said, they've been reviewed by Planning Commission, and recommendation of planning is that they be approved. Both increase the size of sheds and other outbuildings from 160 square feet to 200 square feet. So if council, they were on third reading this evening, once they're read a third time, if council wants to consider them, I outlined what the amendments would be to place those ordinances in a position to be adopted. So you can ask questions at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Director of Finance, Mrs. Fagan.
I have no formal report this evening, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Fagan? Next, we will move to reports of committees, commissions, and boards, beginning with the Building Committee, Mr. Monaco.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no formal report this evening.
Thank you. Legislative Committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. No report.
We'll move to Public Works and Service Committee, Mr. Balistreo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No report from any meetings. However, there is a change order request, which is Resolution 2023-37, to allow for more funds to be allocated to AJ Cement for additional needed work on Mayfield Road, and we can discuss at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Okay, Recreation Parks Committee, Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On Saturday, April 1st, the Park and Rec Commission held its annual bunny event. Thank you to the Wildcats Sport and Fitness and Mayfield High School for allowing us to move inside for this year's event. Also, thank you to Duncan, Nervous Dog Coffee Bar, and Texas Roadhouse for your donations. This week is the last week of Mayfield Heights residents to register for day camp before we open to non-residents. For more information, call the office at 440-442-2627. I just want to add that the bunny event went off very well. The vast majority of the people that were there were very pleased that we did it inside and that we did it in the gym. The kids had a ball and the parents had a ball with them. So it was really a great event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. Mr. Mayor.
I just want to echo Mr. Mano's sentiments. It was phenomenal inside.
Yeah.
I think it'll be really nice in our new community center. It'll be, everybody handled it very well. The parents, the kids, it was awesome. So, yeah, they did a very good job.
Okay. Safety and Transportation, Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have a Safety and Transportation Committee meeting scheduled for this Wednesday, April 12th at 5:30 p.m. We can meet here in council chambers. There's no other meeting. And it's to discuss cameras for the intersections.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to thank Chief Elliott for another year of a fantastic annual report. Thank you, Chief.
Board of Zoning, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. The Board of Zoning will meet here tomorrow at 7 p.m. There are several items on the agenda.
Thank you. And Planning Commission, Mr. Balistreo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Planning Commission met last Monday, April the 3rd. Council's been copied on the minutes. We did discuss the accessory building ordinances that were sent to the Planning Commission by council. With a few changes, the amended ordinances are on the agenda for your approval tonight, as already addressed by the law director. Also, there's one motion tonight to approve a preliminary site plan for Verizon Wireless, which will be going into Mayland next to Kane's Chicken. The Planning Commission approved the site plan pending necessary parking variance and ABR approval.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike.
That's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Balistreo? All right, we will now proceed to the public portion of the meeting. Pursuant to City Code, each person will be allotted 5 minutes to speak with a maximum of 30 minutes for the entire public portion. If you are here in connection with an agenda item, this is your opportunity to address council. If you would like to be heard this evening and have not done so already, please fill out a form located at the entrance of the council chamber. During the public portion, I will call each person wishing to speak to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record and speak clearly into the microphone. It is now 7:34. I will open up the public portion. Mr. Fred Kramer. Yes, that's our podium.
Fred Kramer, 1187 Golden State Boulevard. For the last 11 months, I've had the pleasure of following the ongoing discussion related to alternative energy and various things about it. I've talked to members of council, other members of the city administration, and many members of the public. What is found intriguing about the fact is that as we've moved along, changes have occurred in the outside world encompassing solar energy and its application. I think the one thing that also should be remembered by everybody and thought about is we do have an ongoing situation where solar energy does exist in the city of Mayfield Heights. It is going to continue to grow, will happen more and more in the future, and we'll see more applications. I noted the last ABR agenda had one other case of solar energy on it. I'm sure that's going to continue. The interesting thing is, as long as we have that energy issue out there, as long as solar energy applications are being sent, I have felt very strongly that it was important that they be regulated and controlled through ordinance. Many things we can handle on an ad hoc basis, but this is not one. It's something that has to be looked at in a total picture of what's going on. A number of factors are going on, and we've talked about the residential. My daughter has made a number of presentations. The legislative committee had a very detailed inspection meeting on it, produced a lot of materials, including ordinances from other communities. So council's been apprised of what's going on. And then after that meeting, I think my daughter did prepare a white paper for the council's benefit as to the various issues. But there are so many factors. One of the factors that comes to play is after the approval, what happens? I think one of the important things is somewhere in there is a control so that the city is aware of where the solar energy is in various locations. The fire chief raised the important issue. It's important for his people to be aware when the first responders go in that this type of equipment is present and on our property for their own safety. I think another factor that comes in is whether or not the solar energy is going to be properly installed by qualified contractors. I get blurbs on my phone, and I'm not sure if everybody else does, but I get them, relative to people suggesting that solar energy, they can get it for nothing, which I know is not true. So the hustlers are out there looking, and we want to have competent contractors installing. I know the city has a program relative to all contractors being certified, but I think it's important that they certified, that they know what they're doing in installing this type of material, and this building department is in a position to follow up and very carefully look at how it's going in so it'll be best for the whole community. We have talked a lot about the residential aspect. I'm looking down though and saying another issue. I'm seeing a potential of commercial aspect coming in. I can just see in the future that we're going to have the price of electricity going up with all the factors that are going in the community, which I don't have to detail in the state of Ohio. You will see higher costs for electric service. And then you're going to see the next thing, which a major user will suddenly decide they want their own application. In the last Cleveland magazine, there was an article called The Green Issue, in which they quoted the people at Progressive that said they had reduced their cost at their main campus by 40% for the installation of that solar energy farm. It doesn't take much stretch of the imagination to say, wait a minute, one of our big users, the hospital, will suddenly say, hey, let's go out and show how good we are, how green we are, and come up with an application for solar energy. And when that application hits the desk back in the building department, it's too late to pass an ordinance. you're going to have to live with what you've got. And I can see that happening. I can also see adjustments out of Washington where they try to help with alternate energy, with the green approach of the Washington people. So I can just see that coming from administration. Looking down the road, it's not out far from the imagination to see you're looking at individuals, commercial, who are going to look at this well beyond the residential. We have right now in the community, the information has been furnished to the legislative committee. Mrs. Abed and Mr. DeJohn have it. Council has received it. We
Mr.
have
Kramer?
the individual who will sit.
Mr. Kramer, we had 5 minutes, so just have to get a motion to have you continue.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Belstrade, second by Mrs. Tressi. Go ahead, sorry.
Anyway, thank you. We also have in the city, people who will come in, we have identified a consultant who will come in and sit down at no cost with the building department and with the fire chief to look at the issues. It just seems logical from a standpoint of city planning to have an ordinance on the books when you see something going forward that is going to specifically affect so many entities. It isn't, out of the realm of possibility to see both residential and commercial applications, and we should be in a position to be anticipated. I'm looking at it just from the standpoint of good municipal governance, and that, of course, is what this body is all about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kramer. Next, Deborah Kramer.
My name is Deborah Kramer. I live at 1110 Belrose Road, and I'll make up for his long by my short. I just want to say I'm still here, even though I missed a meeting, actually two lately. I've been coming since June of last year to almost every single meeting requesting that the city creates an ordinance on solar panel. But what he said is fine for me.
Thank you. Mary Ann Viveros.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Viveros. I live at 1269 Washington, and I'm here in support of Mrs. Kramer and what she's trying to do. I agree that we need an ordinance. We're hoping to put solar on our house at some point, and we're kind of concerned about what we will and won't be able to do. And I just see that this is our future. It's what we need to do, and it's just time for everybody to come together and find a solution that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chad Lichten.
All right, I'm Chad Lichten. I live at 6295 Fairhaven, and I've been to a lot of these meetings. Can I not use the microphone? Can I just not use it?
That's fine.
Okay.
You have to speak into it. Mr. Chad, you have to.
I have a big voice. You'll hear me. You'll hear me. All right.
The recording
All right,
and.
for the books. Okay, I'm Chad Lichten. I've spoken here many times before. I've gotten to know many of you. And I'm just here again saying all the same things I've always said. I want to start with saying to Mr. Mano that if you need paper, Walgreens is an excellent place. They have very cheap poster prints.
Mr. Lichten,
And
you can't address council.
oh, I'm not affiliated with them anyway. Anyway, I was thinking about the Pledge of Allegiance that we all say and how the ending, and liberty and justice for all. I don't think liberty applies to me. I think my freedoms are being undermined by a bully neighbor who no one here seems to understand the issue, but years ago he made the decision after learning of, that it hurt me to amp it up to some crazy bulb that will blind you. And so, my freedom to look out of my window at night is just not there. Like, think about that. I mean, liberty and freedom, I would say, are interchangeable words. I just think it's a basic human right to be able to look out of your window. And I think that if any of you had a neighbor like mine who chose to hurt you with the brightest technology available to him, you would take the option that not to have that in your life. If you had the option to have a light outside your window that blinds you or not at all, you would choose to be able to look out of your window at night comfortably. No one would choose, so it becomes by chance. You have a neighbor who doesn't even live here, he just owns a home, who doesn't like you, who wants to ruin your night every night of your life. Half of our life is dealing with this and blocking this. So if you have a conscience, understand the situation as I have to live with it. And I could think of plenty of names for the new pool, but I will spare you that. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Licton. Is there anyone else this evening that would like to be heard? Okay, it is 7:45, and I'm going to close the public portion. We'll move to resolution number 2023-33. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2023-33, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with IO Solutions to provide civil service promotional testing services in the city of Mayfield Heights and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
So moved?
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Monaco, second by Mr. Mano. All members should have received a contract from IO Solutions for the purpose of allowing this company to provide promotional testing for the lieutenant position available within the police department. The cost of the contract is not to exceed $25,645. Does any member of council have any questions or further comments? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. This resolution has been approved. Moving to resolution number 2023-34. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2023-34. A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Design to Wellness for the purchase of senior fitness equipment for use at the Mayfield Heights Community Center and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. Balestria. The equipment portion of the project was budgeted for $53,974. To stay within this amount, the Parks and Rec Director would like to purchase some of the equipment as gently used to keep it within the budgeted amount. There were 3 quotes, and it was suggested to go with Design to Wellness. I have Mr. Tagg here from the Recreation Department if we have any further questions. Does any council member have any questions? Is there anything you'd like to add? Okay. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution 2023-34 has been adopted. Moving to resolution number 2023-35, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2023-35, A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Design to Wellness for the purchase of senior fitness equipment for use at the Mayfield Heights Community Center and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mr. Monaco. This resolution is for the equipment that would authorize one-half of the amount to be paid to get the equipment ordered from Design 2 Wellness in the amount of $27,551. Any questions from council? Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a resident ask me how are they going to keep track that it's just for seniors? Are they going to, seniors going to have a swipe card or something to get in?
Mr. Tag. Might have that answer.
At this point, we are going to have membership cards. What we're going to charge, I don't know, but we will have membership cards that they will swipe, just like the pool.
Just, and will it be like 24/7 that they can
No, there will be hours. They have not been determined, but there will be set hours.
set hours? Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Mr. Balestrea.
What was the price you quoted? I think we have a different number.
$24,907.
Yeah, I thought you said something different.
I did.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. This resolution has been approved, and thank you, Nick, for explaining that. Resolution number 2023-36, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2023-36, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Ashley Ryan Consulting, LLC, to provide for consulting services regarding the naming rights procedure for the Aquatic Center and Community Center in the city of Mayfield Heights, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Mrs. Tressi.
I think we should keep this on first reading so we have the opportunity to look more closely at if this is what we want to do and determine that by the next meeting.
Yeah, we have one more
Since we
meeting
still have
before the
time.
contract would start, so we can put this on first reading. Okay, great, thank you.
Is there a motion to suspend?
Is there there wasn't a motion to suspend.
Oh, okay,
She just held her finger out
right. But
to ask the question, to put it on first
I know,
reading.
but nobody else had a chance.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Is everybody okay with keeping it on first reading?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion to add Resolution 2023-37 to the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea
Second?
and second by Mr. Monaco. Roll call on the motion.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution number 2023-37 has been added to the agenda. Mr. Murphy to read.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2023-37, a resolution authorizing change order number 1 with A&J Cement Contractors, Inc. for the 2022 Road Program D, Mayfield and Ridgeberry, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. DeJohn. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Belstrao. Second by Mrs. Tressi. This resolution is to authorize a change order for the contract with A&J Cement Contractors for an additional amount of $35,000 in addition to the contract that was authorized by council. This change order would add 2 areas for immediate emergency repair at Mayfield Road and Golden Gate and at I-271 southbound off-ramp. This was added to our agenda this evening. We all received an email from Mr. Murphy last week, and Mr. Cheney is here this evening. Maybe if you'd like to come up and go over some of the suggested changes for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Public Works Department and myself, we went out on Mayfield Road. Thank you to Chief Mealy for this police escort so that we could get out there and measure pavement. And we marked all the areas that we felt needed to be done. And there were a couple areas that we actually didn't mark that day, and it was brought to my attention again by the service department that the complaints we get, the potholes we fill, the loop detector that doesn't work, and the flat tire complaints, that we should add these other 2 areas. Going back and doing the calculations, we need another $35,000 to get more slabs out, to replace concrete slabs and joints on Mayfield Road. These are the worst of the worst. As I put in my email, there are other areas out there that are getting bad, and we have to do it in the future. I don't know if it's next year or 2 years from now or 3 years from now, but some of that pavement has fallen apart. I did have a conversation with ODOT today, and I'm going to meet with them hopefully this week yet and talk about an urban paving program so they would come in and help us out here on fixing Mayfield Road. It was, I believe, installed in '08 or '09. Maybe it was over both of those years because it took, I think, a couple of years to put in that concrete pavement. And the eastbound section seems to be falling apart, not westbound, but eastbound is considerably worse. And it must have been the mix of the concrete they used or something like that. But anyway, I'm suggesting we do a couple more areas, the ones you suggested there, and recommending the change order.
I'm sure council has some questions. Mrs. Tressi.
Mr. Cheney, is the contractor using ODOT concrete so that they can drive on it on the street sooner than?
We're using an MS design, which is a medium set, and it sets up in 3 days. Yes, it will set up. We're going to open it up to traffic as soon as we can. Correct.
Thank you.
And it is an ODOT mix, an ODOT preferred mix. Yeah.
I just wondered, if it was going to be blocked for, 2 weeks or
No.
Or if it would open
we're
up
using
sooner.
a fast setting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes, does somebody check the quality of the concrete? I know you said in 2008, when they did Mayfield Road, now that's falling apart, do they check that? I imagine it has to be a certain standard. Is somebody checking that?
That's correct. I mean, and ODOT handled that project back then, but you take cylinders and then you take beams, and you test the beams and the cylinders for so many cubic yards of concrete poured. Usually it's every 50 cubic yards. Take 3 cylinders, you break them, and those are the 28-day strength and the 56-day strength. So you kind of wait, but yes, we do check that. Right.
Thank you.
Does any member of council have any further questions? Mr. Monaco.
Mr. Cheney, have you looked at possibly doing the whole road and see what costs would be incurring?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to do that.
Don't scare us.
I have not looked at that. And I would not recommend the city of Mayfield Heights do that either. If that's going to be done, it has to be ODOT. All right. This is more of a maintenance thing, but if we're going to do a complete road replacement, ODOT is going to take the lead on that. We're going to get federal dollars or somebody else to help us. Yeah.
I just have a question. Does ODOT help with some of the maintenance stuff ever?
This is a gray area. It's considered maintenance, joints and slab repairs. If you're doing a capital improvement, that would be an ODOT thing. But I'm going to have that discussion with them because I don't think it lasted as long. Concrete should last 35 some years before we're patching it. This is too soon, my opinion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Are there any further questions or comments? And just clarify the Golden Gate area. Is it right at Mayfield?
Well, it's the Costco side, okay, and it's on the, I call that the northwest corner. pretty much, right, Chuck? I think it's, and it's not, the whole lane, the whole thing won't be blocked. It's just the one corner, and it's right at Mayfield Road, but just north. So it's not really in the traveled lane, but it's just north on the Golden Gate. And it's bad. There's some really big holes there, so.
Okay. All right, any further questions? Roll call on the motion. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn. Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution 2023-37 has been approved. Thank you. Moving to ordinances, we'll begin with ordinance 2023-10. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2023-10, an ordinance amending Chapter 1159 of the codified ordinances of the city titled U1 Single Family House Districts by amending Section 115912. Third reading.
Is there a motion to amend ordinance number 2023-10?
Amended, yeah. You're right, I'm sorry. I got
This is amended, right? Yeah. A motion to amend ordinance 2023-10. Moved by Mr. Balestria
Second?
and second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to amend.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve as amended? Moved by Mr. Monaco, second by Mr. Mano. Everyone should have received a copy of the amended ordinance. The changes were highlighted in yellow in your packets. After this ordinance was reviewed at the Planning Commission, these changes were made and approved as amended. And that we are seeing this now before us this evening. Mr. Balestria, is there anything you would like to add?
Just the two things that, the shed size has now been increased to 200 square feet. The requirements for acreage of the land has been removed, as well as the height restrictions on the sheds themselves. That was the amendment.
Okay. Are there any questions from council? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this ordinance has been adopted. Moving to ordinance number 2023-11, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2023-11, an ordinance amending Chapter 1161 of the codified ordinances of the city titled U2, Two-Family House Districts, by amending Section 1161.09. Third reading.
Is there a motion to amend ordinance number 2023-10? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second. 11. Moved by Mr. Balestria. Roll call on the motion to amend.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved?
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta and second by Mr. Monaco. The changes here were highlighted in yellow in your packets as well. This ordinance was also reviewed by planning, and the changes were made and approved as amended. Mr. Balestria, would you like to go over the changes?
Same changes as before, only this is for a two-family district, and this should decrease the Board of Zoning Appeals agenda immensely.
Are there any further questions?
Mr. Kramer's nodding his head.
Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, I should also add that one of the amendments is that this has been declared to be an emergency. So if there is 5 members who vote in favor on this one as well as the other one, then it will go into effect immediately. Otherwise, you'll have to wait 30 days. So if you pass it with 5, it'll go into effect immediately.
Okay. All right. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes?
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance number 2023-11 has been approved. This time I need a motion to remove ordinance number 2022-04 from the table.
So moved?
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Belstrao. Roll call on the motion.
Mr. DeJohn.
No.
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes?
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance number 2022-04, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2022-04, an ordinance enacting Section 1195.09 of the codified ordinances of the city titled Light Trespassing and declaring an emergency. And I honestly don't remember if this was read 3 times before tabling.
I don't remember.
So to be safe, let's do, if there's a motion to suspend, so it can be voted upon.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Belstrao and second by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes?
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes?
Mr. Monaco.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
No.
Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Sabetta. This ordinance has been reviewed by our law director, our city prosecutor, our local judge, 2 different police chiefs, 2 different building directors, and by our own council legislative and building committee chairs. At this time, this legislation needs to come off the table, and this council needs to decide if we feel we need to pursue this ordinance further or accept the professional opinions of those above mentioned and take no further action on this ordinance, this particular one in front of us. Does any member of council have any questions or comments? Mrs. Tressi?
Can I just ask what the outcome was of that legislative meeting about this? Was it recommended by chair and co-chair to come forward, or?
I will refer over, I know there were minutes on this legislative committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
No, it's not recommended. There was no recommendation for this. Mr. DeJohn did have some information he extended to the chief, and the chief's position stays.
Madam
Mr. DeJohn?
So at that meeting, I said maybe this legislation needs to be revised before it's brought to council. And obviously, you're not going to give us an opportunity to do that. So based on what all the chiefs said, Mr. Thomas said, they just think, and the prosecutor, they don't think this legislation can be enforced. But I guess you don't know until you pass something whether it can be enforced or not, until it's challenged. So I sent to all of you, I think I had Mrs. Lloyd send all of you information about light legislation around the country to take a look at that, and then I thought we were going to come back together and then talk about the current legislation that was written. So I guess we're not going to do that, but that's what I suggested, Mrs. Teresi, back then. So.
Well, I thought, excuse me for just a minute, I thought that this actual legislation that was in front of us was looked at, and we were going to vote it down. And if further new legislation was going to be created, that would come after this was taken off the table and voted down, because we knew that it was not going to be held up in any kind of a court situation, that it would not be, because of the research that Mr. Murphy did. I mean, am I wrong for saying that? I don't know if anybody could add to
We're
that.
correct. That is
Mrs.
this
Sabetta.
legislation that we are getting ready to vote on.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that we can't talk about it. This particular legislation that was drawn up was what we needed. We found that it could not be held up. Go ahead, Mr. Murphy.
Jump in here. Yes, at the meeting, the prosecutor and everybody else who was there, the building commissioner as well as myself, all indicated this could not be enforced and therefore should be voted down. It was discussed that there should be maybe some changes made, but I've heard nothing from anybody as to any changes that would be suggested. So this one, as is written, it's my recommendation that it be defeated. And if council wants to come up with some additional legislation or different legislation, we'll look at that. But since the last legislative committee meeting, which I forget when it was, but it was probably close to a year ago, we've heard nothing from anybody as to what could be presented to council. So it's still my recommendation that this one be voted down.
Mrs. Tressi.
Was the legislation, was it the ordinance that was from California? Is that what remained? Was never,
Generally, yes.
so we just took that was submitted, and so we're really voting on that, basically?
The one that's been written as
The one that was submitted?
2022-04,
Yeah.
which is based on the California ordinance.
California, so it hasn't been updated or changed, or,
It
and it
was
wasn't our own
changed.
legislation that was written?
Mr. DeJohn would have to,
I don't think it was changed a lot, and that's why I said at the time in the legislative meeting that it needed work before it could come to council. So,
Mr. Monaco.
A question for Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, is there a possibility of drafting an ordinance that would be enforced and it would be successful in the court of law?
I haven't found any ordinance that would be applicable to the city of Mayfield Heights that I think, with regard to light, strength of light or dissemination of light or anything having to do with light, that would be enforceable in a court of law unless there were like a spotlight that was shining from one property into another one, like a regular spotlight. Highland Heights has an ordinance like that, with regard to spotlights. But with regard to a regular, a light post like we've been discussing here, no, I don't think there's anything that could be come up with that would be enforceable.
As a follow-up, we do have an ordinance in a commercial establishment where you cannot shed lighting onto abutting properties. In other words, it has to be zero reading at the property line. Is that possible to have something like that in a residential area? And I know it's hard because you have the lights from the streets, they're trespassing on your property, and the houses are so close that even if you have a light in a kitchen and you have the window open, that light is going to get into the abutting neighbor. So I guess I'm asking, even if we're trying to draft an ordinance, you still think that it's not going to be enforceable?
Difficult, if not impossible, to enforce. And for example, the houses are so close. You've got your dining room light on, and it's shining on your neighbor. If there's no driveway in between, or even if there is a driveway in between, it could be shining into your neighbor, and that would be difficult. This particular one that we're talking about, I've been out there several times in the evening, and the street light is brighter than the post light. So that's probably causing more of a problem than the post light across the street. So, yeah, it remains my opinion. I haven't seen anything that I think could be enforceable.
Thank you.
Madam
Mr. DeJohn.
So, Mr. Murphy, how do we enforce then our commercial lighting ordinance?
It's a commercial area, not a residential area. So you've got commercial lighting on the parking lot, et cetera, and that's a different ballgame than the residential area.
But it's still illuminating a residential area. I remember when I was first on council, I had somebody on Som Center Road that called me and contacted me about the lights on a commercial building was shining into his house at nighttime, and the shopping center did rectify that, so.
Correct, yeah, that's, a commercial area, you have more control over a commercial area than you do a residential, especially if it's shining into a residential area. It becomes more of a nuisance. And there's always the nuisance ordinance under state law that if, a light is creating a nuisance, that person can always, follow the nuisance ordinance and file a lawsuit in that regard. But it's up to the building commissioner. If the city's light ordinance regarding commercial establishments is being violated, then the building commissioner does have authority to go and request that those lights be changed in the commercial area.
Mr. DeJohn?
So if you remember, it was the resident on Parker, how this all came about, that actually showed us pictures in her home of lights shining through their upstairs window. I mean, you could actually read stuff on shelves in one of the rooms. So that's why I said, well, hey, can we come up with some type of ordinance that can shield this light, still illuminate the area, maybe add some motion detection to it, so it would, be able to be enforced. So that's what I was trying to negotiate here, so.
I think with, not to put the chief or the building director on the spot, but I think, they talked to us several times about this particular incident, this issue, and how other cities are going to getting more lighting in neighborhoods to protect their neighborhoods for safety purposes. So, right? We talked about this. I don't know. I'm not sure what else we can do with this particular ordinance in front of us. It's been sitting on the table for over a year, and if we want to continue to look into this, I think the new legislation would have to be drawn up. But this one in particular has been the one that everybody's been reviewing, and there's nothing further that can be taken from action on with this one. That's why it's being removed from the table. I don't think they're closing the whole issue down, but I think this particular ordinance can't just sit here forever.
Call for the question.
Call for a vote. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balestria.
No.
Mrs. Teresi.
No.
Mrs. Sabetta.
No.
Mr. DeJohn.
No.
Mr. Monaco.
No.
Mr. Mano.
No.
Mrs. Snyder.
No. Okay, moving to motion A, Mr. Murphy.
Motion A, a motion to approve the preliminary site plan for a new 4,000 square foot, single-story building for Verizon located at 5870 Mayfield Road, contingent upon ABR review and variances being granted.
Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano. Second by Mrs. Teresi. This motion would allow for a preliminary site approval for a Verizon building to be built within the city of Mayfield Heights. This was approved by the fire department and police department, and 2 variances were needed, will be needed for parking, the width of the parking lot. Mr. Balestra, did you want to go over any of this, please?
No, we looked at the site plan, that we felt at least the majority of us felt the site plan was very well conceived. There's a lot of landscaping on the site. They are asking for a variance because of the excessive parking. That they're over the amount of parking allowed. And the ABR does have to look at the building and approve that before we can finalize it. But right now, it's just a preliminary, and it was approved by planning.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions for Mr. Balestra?
I have a question.
Mr. Monaco.
Madam President. I have nothing against the project. I think we should move forward with this. But the question that I have is, are we following the right procedure here? I think the first step that this project should take is going to the Board of Zoning Appeals and get variances. The second one, after they get the variances, then they should go to the Architecture Review Board for approval. And then they would come to council, because the BZA makes recommendation to council. So we can't come to council first and we make a determination, then that may affect what the BZA is thinking about the project.
Mr. Balistreo.
That's why you have a preliminary site plan first. So planning did look at the plan. The plan itself is approved. We recognize there's variances that may be required. So they're not going to get approval unless they get the variances. But the site plan itself was approved should be approved as a preliminary. And then get the other approval from the ABR. You don't get those approvals, then the plan's not going to go forward.
Mr. Balistreo, what happens if we approve this and then the BZA turns it down? Now, you have approved a site plan that it's not going to be approved or sustained by the BZA.
Just a preliminary site plan. It's not a final.
It's just a preliminary, Mr. Monaco. It still has to come back for a final. Mayor, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, we can.
That's our procedure. That's how the city does it. It gets a preliminary, then it goes for any variances and goes to ABR, and then it comes back to council ultimately for approval or a denial. But the preliminary is good for council to see what is what may be and what issues they may have with what the plan is. So that's why we have a preliminary.
Okay, Mr. Balistreo.
Just to add what the mayor said, it'll go back to planning for final after the approval.
That's what he said.
Yeah, before it comes back to council.
Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Monaco,
No.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Balistreo.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Tracy,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this motion has been approved. Moving to motion B, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Motion to authorize the sale of 2 building department vehicles. The first is a 2015 Ford Explorer, VIN number 1FM5K8AR4FGC26730. The second is a 2016 Ford, VIN number 1FADP3F24GL288336.
Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mrs. Tracy. Second by Mrs. Sabetta. This is something that we typically will do from year to year for vehicles with wear and tear and overage mileage, as well as equipment that needs to be replaced. Mrs. Tracy?
So why are we replacing a vehicle that has 48,000 miles? I already know half the answer. It's already in the budget. It's
Thomas?
already been approved, but some people drive cars that have 100,000 miles.
Mr. Thomas?
So I received a donation from the police department of 2 vehicles that left me with an abundance of building department vehicles that are taking up spaces in the parking lot. I'm open to suggestions on what else to do with them, but at this point, I don't have any other solutions other than to sell them.
Okay, since you were gifted another vehicle.
2.
2? That's nice. Good, because I'm sure the residents would say, you're getting rid of a vehicle that has 48,000 miles on it. And, some people can barely buy groceries, and to them, that would be a car that would last another 10 years, even though it's a 2015, so I had to ask.
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mayor?
We're not replacing a vehicle. Yeah, these are extra cars. So we're not spending money.
No, I know
So
you're
I don't
not.
think the
No, you were
grocery
just gifted.
analogy is appropriate
Well-
because we're getting rid of cars to bring money into the city that we don't need.
Yes, but one would ask why we were getting rid of a car that had 48,000 miles on it. Does our building department drive their vehicles home?
No, they do not.
Thank you.
I would like to publicly thank the police department for their donation of 2 vehicles. I look forward to continuing this relationship.
Mr. DeJohn?
Now he's on
Yes,
the
that
record, Chief.
2016, what type of vehicle is it?
Explorer.
Ford.
I know it's a Ford, but what make?
Explorer.
Explorer. They're both Explorers then?
One's an Explorer, another one's an old Fusion.
Oh, so this 2016 is a Fusion?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes?
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Ballestrea?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes, motion B has now been approved. No. Moving to motion C, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Motion to authorize the sale of service department vehicles and equipment. The first is a 1990s Lee Boy paving machine. Second is a 1980s Ford Work Bull tractor. The third is a 1996 Ford F-350 dump truck, VIN number 2FD KF38F7T CAY 2742. Fourth is a 1991 GEHL skid steer, model 4615. And the fifth is a 2004 Toro Workman 07253-230000678.
Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Belstrea,
Second?
second by Mrs. Sabetta. Pretty much the same as the last motion. We have Mr. Brunello here this evening if there's any questions about any of these, any of this equipment or vehicles. Are there any comments or questions from council?
They're old,
They're old.
They're old.
very old.
They're very old.
Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Ballestrea?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Motion C has now been approved. Is there any new business or comments from council? Mr. DeJohn?
Well, while we're cleaning house here on tabled ordinances, why don't we pull the waste ordinance off the table, since that's probably not going to go anywhere either? And remember, that ordinance came up because people were moving out of the city, or moving, and putting their trash on the tree lawn, the whole tree lawn, to the neighbors on both sides, and then leaving it there until the trash hauler came a week later. So that's why I wanted to do this, this ordinance, to prevent that from happening. But I guess we'll pull it off the table and defeat it.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Resolution also tabled 2023-26. What exactly happens to that now that we've amended the variance?
So, that was a good question. I spoke to the building director today about that. This particular person would not need a variance, so we would probably have to remove that from the table, and it would be, I would turn to the law director to see if it's best to, she won't need a variance anymore. So we would just vote this down, or would you just
Dismiss it.
dismiss it from council, from the table?
I would remove it from table, and once a new application were made, because, I'm not sure what size shed was requested, but if it came within the confines of the ordinance that was approved tonight, then they could just make the application and get the approval of the building department. But they would have to reapply, or say our application, we're reinstating it, or something to that effect, something official, so that the building department can approve it, and then I would deal with this legislation. I wouldn't do it tonight.
Okay, right. All right, thank you. Any further questions? Mr. DeJohn?
So we're not going to pull it off tonight. We're going to wait till the next council meeting, 2022-03?
That's the waste container and pickup.
Correct. That was the waste ordinance that
Yes.
I revised.
We're not going to pull it off this evening, no.
Okay. I'd like to know how you pick and choose, but
If there's a motion to do it, we can definitely do it.
we can wait till next meeting.
We have to go back and open up ordinances and go, we can definitely do that.
No, we'll wait till next meeting.
Okay.
Madam President?
Mrs. Sabetta?
Was that ordinance not sponsored by 3 or 4 people?
Which ordinance are you talking about?
I'm talking about the waste. My question has been answered on the other one. Was it not?
I don't have it with me.
Mr. DeJohn?
It was an ordinance I proposed to change it, and I don't think there was 3 people on there. There could have been. It's from 2022. I don't remember. It's so old, so.
This old. Okay, we can look into that. That's why it wouldn't be, yeah, we'll get a copy of it and we'll have it ready for our next meeting. Okay, Mrs. Tressi?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to say that I was walking on Mayfield Road past, I think, Nick Mayer, and I think they have 2 driveways and sidewalks that are really in poor condition. I was just wondering if our building inspectors have been out to see that.
We have, we're working with them on getting it corrected. Apparently, there was some type of sale that's supposed to take place with that property, and there was a transfer of ownership, and they're working out who's going to replace the apron prior to. We've gone up and down Mayfield Road, and that is one of the last remaining aprons that needs to be addressed. In regards to the trash, anytime we come across a tree lawn that is full of trash, we contact property owners, we contact Kimball, we contact anybody who we can get a hold of to get the trash off the curb ASAP. So I don't know if that helps with your.
Madam President.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yeah, it was for those people that were moving out of the city, okay, and you couldn't find them, so how do you find them if they're gone? So I think, if I remember right, in this ordinance that we had a fine that could have been applied to their taxes.
Mr. DeJohn, maybe we should give a copy to Mr. Thomas, since you weren't here at the time that this came before us. Maybe you can review it together if you'd like, since he brought it up, before we just pull it off and vote it for or against, since you're new, you know.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to.
Okay, great. Is that good?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Mayor?
I was just looking over the old minutes. I think that suggested change by Mr. DeJohn, I think it's in there, what you were looking for.
Which one?
The suggested changes to the minutes, that paragraph is in the minutes, definitely.
Yeah, that's correct. I got a little confused, as Mr. Mano said, because you printed it out like a book, so half of it was there and half of it was on another page. So I finally printed it out tonight, so they were all single sheets. And then Mrs. Fagan pointed me out that it was there, so thank you.
Missed it, okay.
I just missed it.
All right, thank you. And Mrs. Tressi?
I was just going to say that there was kitchen cabinets on my street, on the tree lawn, and I called the dispatch office this weekend and said, they put them out there on Saturday, and trash isn't picked up till Tuesday. It looked like the house may have been vacant, but later in the day, there were cars and people, so they just must have redone their kitchen and left everything on the tree lawn on a Saturday for, Easter weekend. So it looked pretty bad.
Okay.
So, man.
Mr. DeJohn?
So, yeah, Mrs. Teresi, I think that's what I was trying to accomplish with the waste ordinance. So if somebody was elderly and needed their waste taken out by someone working at their house, or, one of their relatives comes over to take their garbage out early, that at least maybe they could call, like we do when we're parking overnight on the streets, they can call the city and let us know. And so we just know it's there, and we can make exceptions like that, so.
We
So
can
thank you.
always send this back to and have a building committee meeting if you'd like to meet with Mr. Thomas and your co-chair and revisit this.
Sure.
Why don't you set that up?
Okay.
And then we could go over it whenever you're done.
Very
Okay?
good.
Any further questions or comments from council? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mr. Monaco. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone. We are now adjourned.